Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar on co-ops giving young people a fairer future. Thank you for joining today. I'm Lenny, my pronouns are she, her, and I am one of the co-founding directors of Sister Midnight, and I'm going to be hosting this session today. So what we're going to cover in today's webinar is a brief introduction to what a cooperative is, and looking at how co-ops can empower young people with examples from myself. I'll be talking a little bit about Sister Midnight and the journey we've been on to establish ourselves as a co-op. Amru from the Edinburgh University Student Housing Co-op will be joining to have a chat about the work that he does there. And we've got Bunsey, who's a worker member of Sumer Whole Foods Co-op and part of the Young Co-operators Network, giving us a little bit of introduction to his work as well. We're also going to cover the support that's available from the Hive to help you start a co-op or to develop aspects of a co-op that you already work for or run. And at the end, we'll have a bit of a Q&A to give everyone a chance to ask any questions that they might have. So what is a cooperative? Well, a co-op is a business or an organisation that's owned and controlled by its members, and the purpose of the co-op is dictated by the members and what their needs are, and the co-op functions to serve those needs. The members can be the customers of the co-op, its employees, they can be residents or suppliers who all have a say in how the co-op is run. And cooperatives can be pubs, energy suppliers, taxi firms, bookshops, farmers, sports clubs. There's so many great examples of different types of cooperatives up and down the UK. And we've got more than 7,000 co-ops in the UK that contribute over £40 billion to the UK economy. So it's already quite a significant sector within the economy. But there's a growing movement of co-ops, and we're seeing more and more opening all the time. So members are really at the heart of every co-op. They are the foundation of what they are and why they exist. And the purpose of the co-op drives who the members should be. So if your co-op is a pub, for example, then your members might predominantly be local people who come to the pub to drink there or have food there. With Sister Midnight, my co-op, we are a music venue, or trying to be, as you'll find out more in my presentation shortly. So lots of our members are local musicians and local people who come to see gigs in the local area. And with co-ops, members choose what to do with the profits that that co-op generates. So they can decide how those profits should be distributed or reinvested into the business to improve the services. Members are the owners and shareholders of the co-op, so they actually co-own that business. And they can invest to benefit from the co-op, but they can't invest just to make money. So that's a really crucial thing about co-ops, is that the money that members invest is generally used to benefit everyone, rather than being a way for people to just make a quick buck. And all members have an equal say. That is one of the cooperative principles, which is that no matter how much shareholding a member has in a co-op, it's one vote per member. So that means that the voting power in co-ops can't be bought, which makes them a very democratic business structure. So Co-ops UK commissioned a report this year titled Offering Hope to Future Generations. And that report researched the causes of stress in young people and found them to be mental health, job security, career prospects, climate change, and lack of control over work, which, as a young person in this day and age, I'm sure a lot of people are very familiar with all these issues and how they contribute to a lot of stress in our day-to-day lives. But co-ops can be a really radical solution to a lot of these problems in day-to-day life. Co-ops can empower young people because they give members ownership and control, which aids mental health and well-being pretty significantly. They also allow young people to thrive in an environment that provides fair pay, secure jobs, educational and personal development, and a sense of belonging. And co-op housing provides affordable homes that tenants manage and maintain themselves. So as an alternative to private student lets, they provide the conditions to nurture resilient, healthy graduates who can enter the workforce and shape society from a stronger position. So I'm going to tell you a little bit now about the work that I've done with Sister Midnight and how my personal experience has been with starting that as a co-op. So Sister Midnight is a community benefit society. We're based in Lewisham in southeast London, and our co-op's mission is to open the first community-owned music venue in our local area. We started out as a grassroots music venue in Deptford. The space had previously been a record shop and a music venue, which I'd volunteered at while I was a student. But in 2018, just as I was about to graduate, the owners decided to shut the space down. And I was pretty determined at that point not to see another community and cultural space disappear from our local area, because so many had been closing and we were losing all the spaces for music and culture. So I took over the lease and renamed the space Sister Midnight and continued to run it as a community-centric art space and record shop and cafe. And that's how we started out. In the beginning, we weren't actually formally registered as a cooperative, but cooperative values were really at the heart of how we operated. We always had informal processes in place for communicating with the local community and trying to understand their needs and reflect that in the services that we were delivering. And, you know, that was really simple things like just asking people, do you think that the price of a sandwich and a cup of coffee here is affordable? Can you afford the gig tickets? And trying to think about how we could make our services accessible to as many people in the community as possible. And because of that, we quickly became a really important part of our local music scene and gained a strong reputation as a space of cultural and community significance. Unfortunately, when the pandemic hit in 2020, we were forced to close. We did manage to receive a lot of cultural recovery grant funding, which was amazing for us, but it quickly became clear that we weren't going to be able to continue to operate sustainably in the long term in the way that we had been pre-pandemic. This was because of a number of issues. Partly our landlord stopped maintaining the building that we existed in, so we had a lot of floods which damaged the infrastructure of the building, and we couldn't afford to make the repairs that we wanted to. But also we knew that staffing requirements were going to increase post-pandemic, because we needed to take extra steps and put in extra work to make sure that our space would be safe and hygienic for people to come into. And so because of that, we had to make the decision to leave our space in Deptford and look for somewhere new that would be better suited to housing the kind of venue that we wanted to run. And it was at this point that we had to really rethink how we were going to do things, because I knew that what we were doing for our local community had a lot of value and made a really tangible difference to people's lives, and that was incredibly important. But for me, it wasn't personally sustainable. I was working 75-hour weeks. I was paying myself less than £3 an hour. I was burnt out. I was stressed. And when the pandemic gave me a chance to step back and assess the situation, I could see pretty plainly that things needed to change, because I needed to make the job of running Sister Midnight sustainable for myself on a personal level. And I needed to make sure that Sister Midnight could grow as a business and exist long term for our community. And that wasn't going to happen if the way that I was valuing myself as a worker didn't change. So I started learning about cooperative business models and how they facilitate greater community involvement in businesses, how they can open up grants and fundraising options, and most importantly, how they reflected the ethics of the kind of business I wanted to run. I wanted to be able to respect the value of the labour that the business's staff provided, including my own. I wanted to have the community more involved in shaping the space so that it truly felt like it belonged to them. And I wanted to achieve greater financial stability so that we could have room to develop and refine the cultural offering, instead of just struggling to afford bills from week to week, which is how it was for the first 2 years that we were running that space. So we eventually settled on the community benefit society model, and it seemed like the obvious answer to all of the needs that we wanted to fulfill. It had a not-for-profit structure, which meant that our profits that in an ordinary business might just be distributed amongst a few people at the top would actually be freed up to help us pay staff fairly and improve our services and invest in our business. But crucially, that model also gave us the ability to issue community shares, meaning that local people could buy a share, becoming a member of the Community Benefit Society and a co-owner of the future venue. And the money that people invested in shares would be used to help us find a new space for our venue and re-establish Sister Midnight. So in 2021, we announced that we were going to be converting to a cooperative community ownership model, and we launched our community share offer. And we ran the campaign for 6 months and eventually raised £260,000 through community shares and donations, which we were very pleased with. But of course, switching to a cooperative model didn't solve all of our problems. We still faced quite a number of challenges on the journey to opening our new venue. Including the fact that when we started the campaign, we were aiming to buy a local pub, and despite raising all of this money, we eventually had to pull out of that plan because the property developers that owned the pub wanted to charge us £1 million more than it was actually worth, which is just kind of the story time again in London these days, and in a lot of cities in the UK where gentrification is taking over. We still struggle to be taken seriously by people because of ageism and sexism. You know, we're a co-op that's run all by women under 30, so that was still a challenge that we faced. And of course, the cost of living crisis has been constantly pushing our budget requirements higher and higher. Every time we reassess the cost of doing this project, it seems to come out 20 or 30k more than it was a few months ago. So there's still all of these challenges that we face. But there are far more positive changes that I can name that have come about as a result of us adopting a cooperative business model. First of all, we've had such incredible support from our community. They've been cheering us on whenever things have been tough, and we've had so many people come forward and offer their time and skills to support us, which is something that we did have before, but we've seen so much more of it now since we've become a co-op. And I think that's because people can see that even our legal structure demonstrates our commitment to the community rather than to profit. And so people are more willing to give their time and skills to us. We've also had a lot more support from our local council because of our commitment to involving local people. They've been incredibly helpful in helping us to find a new space, because obviously finding buildings to run businesses in London is one of the biggest challenges. So that's been a huge bonus. We've also had amazing support from organisations like Co-ops UK, Plunkett Foundation, Power to Change, and the Music Venue Trust, etc. And all of that support has largely come about because of the community business model that we've adopted. And we've also had a lot more success in grant funding applications because of our not-for-profit structure. So a lot of the grants that we would have wanted to apply to previously, we wouldn't have been eligible for because we're a for-profit business. But now, because of the way we're structured, so many more funding opportunities have opened themselves up to us, which is going to help us not just set the venue up, but also to be more sustainable in the long term, because there'll be more options for us to get money in to grow and develop the business. And also we have a different approach to our working culture now, which has increased the quality of our working lives. We've been looking into and researching and experimenting with all kinds of different working culture models to try and find what works for us. But the pressure seems to be off a little bit now that we have so much more financial support and community support. We've kind of had the time to step back and think about how we can make working for Sister Midnight a really positive experience for ourselves and for the staff that we'll employ in the future. And on a personal level as well, my experience of starting a co-op has had a really profoundly positive impact on my life. I've gained so much knowledge. It was such a huge learning curve just doing all of this. When we started out deciding to re-establish Sister Midnight as a community benefit society, I don't think I even really knew what a co-op was. And now we're 2 years down the line, and I've got so many skills that I've learned throughout the process that's opened up loads of career opportunities for me. So I'm now training to become a community shares practitioner of the Co-ops UK. As a result of all of the stuff that we've done, I've been offered lecturing work at universities across London I do lots of public speaking on all of the experiences that we've had and promoting cooperative business models. So it's really helped me with my own career development. I've also met so many amazing people from my local area, from like all different demographics and ages and backgrounds, and it's given me a really increased sense of belonging in the local area and makes me feel really connected to all the people that live and work here, which has just been a really lovely thing. Like there's so many more people now that walking around the local area I'll just see and be able to stop in the street and talk to as a result of the stuff that we've done with Sister Midnight and how that's helped us connect to other people. So that's been a really positive thing. And I've gained a lot of confidence in things like public speaking and meeting new people, which I definitely didn't have as much before we started doing this work. So that's been really positive for me. And also confidence just in my ability to affect change. It's been such a rewarding experience to teach so many people about cooperatives and community businesses and see that kind of level of understanding increase in our local community and see new projects springing up and new co-ops starting from people who are saying that they're inspired by what Sister Midnight's done. So that's been a really great thing. And yeah, on that note, just feeling genuinely empowered to make real tangible change locally. I think that community ownership, particularly in the music industry and in the sector of venues, is a really important part of the future of cultural spaces. So it's been amazing to have so much funding and support to start a project, which is not just important at a local level, but also important at a sector-wide level, introducing these kind of models of ownership and ways of working to all sorts of people across the UK who are hopefully going to implement that and help to make music culture more sustainable across the board. And lastly, I've been able to co-create with my colleagues a working environment that meets my expectations for how I want to be valued and treated as a worker, which is so important to me. As a young woman working in music, and a lot of the other jobs I've had, I've experienced a lot of misogyny and discrimination, and I expect better. And so I've been able to create a working environment for myself that meets those expectations, which has just really helped my mental health, that I'm able on the day-to-day to just do my job without having to battle about other people's prejudice. So that's been an incredibly positive change for me. But I think the most important thing is that we just feel really optimistic about the future of our project to create a community-owned venue. There's so many challenges that we have faced and that we're going to continue to face, with the cost of living crisis, the recession, gentrification, all of these kind of obstacles that we know we're going to have to overcome. But we really feel that adopting a cooperative business model is going to make us as resilient and adaptable as we can be as a business. So no matter what challenges get thrown our way, we're going to have the support and the community behind us to be able to overcome them. So thank you for listening to me talking about Sister Midnight. I'm going to hand over to Amru now, who's going to talk you through his work at Edinburgh Student Housing Co-op.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Amro. I live in Edinburgh Student Housing Co-op. I'm going to talk to you briefly about our structure, how we run our co-op, what our members do, and our place within the student community in Edinburgh. So, quick orientation. This is where we are. We're right in the heart of town between Edinburgh's three main universities. So we've got Edinburgh University 10-15 minutes away from here, and we've also got Napier and Heriot-Watt and Queen Margaret University within our reach, and we attract students from all across the city. We have 24 flats in our co-op. We have two buildings. This is the larger of the two. It contains 17 flats. It's a mix of 3, 4, and 5 bed flats, and the smaller of them here contains seven flats of similar size. We have 106 members in total, and the way we structure our co-op is we've divided the tasks that need to be done into 7 different working groups. And within each working group, there's roughly anywhere between 6 and 20 members involved. I'll quickly take you through each of them. Places working group deals with the physical buildings, the maintenance of them, renovations that members want to do within flats, stuff like that. People working group does events within our co-op and with external organizations as well. Participation working group will be one of the ones that I'm going to focus on. It's the one that gives everyone their role, keeps in touch with all of the members to make sure that they're enjoying their role, that they're able to do it, that it's not getting too much. Principle 6 working group has a bit of a funny name. It's based on the 6th principle of cooperation, which is cooperating with other co-ops. And within this working group, we liaise with different co-ops and other external organizations such as the universities in Edinburgh to put on events to help other co-ops start up. Glasgow Student Housing Co-op have been looking for a house for over a year now. They've come close twice, I think, but they've still not managed to find a house. So that's what we do in Principle 6. Finance working group does the finances. So we have a large commercial lease. We have to manage rent coming in from 106 members. Quite a lot of data people in finance working group. Welfare working group deals with welfare issues that arise within the co-op. So if someone's struggling with their mental health or financially, they can come to welfare working group and speak to a welfare working group member. Finally, procedures working group will do stuff like leases, like deposits with Safe Deposit Scotland, making sure room handovers and memberships changing happens smoothly. I'm going to talk you through 4 different roles very specifically now. So we have Ida here, who is a tenancy manager within Procedures Working Group. Sunny, who is a co-convener of Places Working Group. So a co-convener is one of the people who is overseeing the operation of the working group in general. Molly, who's a past member but was the project manager for our basement renovation project, which I'll talk to you about. And Lorenzo is one of the workshare plan coordinators, so one of the people who is responsible for giving everyone their role and making sure the whole workshare plan system runs smoothly. So tenancy manager, at the start of every academic year, we'll have anywhere between 20 and 40 people move out and 40 people move in. And we've got to make sure that we have their leases signed, that we've got their deposits in, that they're students, because you have to be a student to live in Edinburgh Student Housing Co-op. And this kind of role looks very attractive on your CV, and Ida's been doing it for over a year now and is very happy with it. Next, on to the 34 basement renovation project. So when we moved into the buildings 8 years ago, under 34 for which is the larger of the two buildings, there was a car park. We didn't have a communal space, but we came together to convert it into a large communal area. This is pictures of the process of it. So we put flooring in, insulated the ceiling, put glass doors in on the side, and it was more or less entirely run by the students living in the co-op at the time. There was a few bits and pieces where we required external contractors to come in, but for the most part, it was the effort of the people living here, and this was a lot of practical skills that people picked up. More pictures of the process, so putting the flooring in, building tables, installing underfloor heating. This is what it looks like now, with a very happy project manager. I think the total time of building it was over 2 years, so it was a very long process. Here's a picture of the basement in use. This was a gathering that we hosted last spring. We invited all other student cooperators from around the country for a gathering where we could network, share ideas, and make plans for the future for growing the student cooperative movement. Next, I'll talk to you about our intranet. So we have our own server. We try our best not to rely on things like Google or Facebook for communication, because that gives us more control over our own data, and it means that we're not getting bombarded by ads all the time. So we have our server, which runs data storage software like Nextcloud, and our own internal communications platform called Zulip. When I first moved in a year and a half ago, I was kind of a bit unsure about Zulip. I didn't think that anyone would really be using it, but actually it's very, very active. Like, we do have a group on Facebook, but hardly anyone uses that. So it shows that, it is possible to exist outside of the big corporate data world. Okay, I will talk to you about my roles and experiences as well. When I moved in, I started off as a maintenance responder in Places working group, and what I did then was, along with two other people, we were having issues with leaks from the roof. So we went up into our lofts, we made a report, which we passed on to the housing association we leased the buildings from, and the scaffolding is still up a year and a half later. They're still working on it, but progress is being made. After that, I became a budgeter within finance working group, and we put together a budget for the next financial year. It proved very difficult because we now have a cost of living crisis, we have an energy crisis, and that's having a massive impact on how we are running things financially at the moment. Challenge every day for us, really. I then transitioned to Principal 6 working group to work with student co-op homes. That's how I got involved with Glasgow. And I am now back in finance as one of the two finance co-conveners. Why did I choose to move into a co-op? Before moving into Edinburgh Student Housing Co-op, I lived in private rented accommodation for 3 to 4 years, and when the pandemic happened, I was put on furlough from my part-time job, which wasn't enough to even cover my rent. I had to start doing Deliveroo to just, be able to pay my bills, have food on the table, and it just got to a point where it felt like I shouldn't be doing this. I didn't deserve to be working so hard. only to be making my landlord wealthier and wealthier. So I started looking for alternative solutions, and Edinburgh Student Housing Co-op came up. I applied, I want to say in January of 2020. Oh, I must. I applied in January of 2021, and I got a place in March. So Edinburgh Student Housing Co-op has a very long waiting list. However, you usually get a place faster than you think you will, because a lot of people on the waiting list make plans otherwise, and then you move up pretty fast. But demand is really high. Like, I think so we just closed our last round of applications in November, and we had 120 people on the waiting list. So yeah, we are very highly in demand, and it's something that we're working to see more of across Edinburgh and across the country.
Great, thanks so much for that, Anne-Marie. Bunty, would you like to do your presentation on SUMA and the Young Co-operatives Network?
Absolutely, 2 seconds. So hopefully you can all see this.
Yeah, all good.
So good afternoon, I'm Bunty, my pronouns today are he, him. I am a member of SUMA, where I've been for the last 2 years, a bit more, and I'm also now part of the YCN, which is the Young Co-operators Network. So SUMA, some of you may be familiar with it, some of you might have seen the brand, I don't know, some of you have probably never heard of us. At its heart, SUMA is a vegetarian worker cooperative which specialises in vegan and vegetarian food, and we also sell other natural and other products. We're a bit of an anomaly, as we are Europe's largest equal pay worker co-op. There are supposedly around 300 of us workers, and around 200 of those are members. Everyone is paid the same hourly wage as one of our biggest who's. We've done away with traditional corporate hierarchical structure, so there's no managers and no directors by traditional sense. There's just some numbers to prove that we're quite a big cooperative. So although SUMA began in 1975 selling chickpeas and lentils, we've made our own mark on the industry, really, not just food, but body care and other things, which is no mean feat for a worker co-op, I'd say. So at the beginning, we were the cliche of worker co-ops. You can see we were basically just some people from the housing estate got together, bought a warehouse, and started selling food as a co-op. But now we're basically the same. We're still a much larger group of people, a segment of society. There's just more of us, and now we're masquerading as a large business that looks like we got our shit together, but we're still a worker co-op at the heart. That's the main thing. So yeah, my story, lovely picture. My story starts like that of many young people. I think many people with privilege, of course. I was 16, I had a passion for engineering, and so I needed to choose a route at that age which could pursue engineering best. For that reason, I applied for an apprenticeship in applied engineering within the manufacturing industry. Here I am. Whilst apprenticeships are a great thing, that's not what we're here to talk about. They are sadly also just market in town for cheap labour, which is what I was. So I worked at this large corporation for 4 years. It was the perfect lived experience of how it feels to be only a number on the payroll. Overworked and undervalued, all the invisible shareholders could pay themselves big dividends and pat each other on the back after the end of a well-earned year of exploiting other people. I chose this picture because it is the perfect summary of this. Here you have the CEO in the middle. and they're surrounded by apprentices, including me. I can't say for certain, but I'm pretty sure that the combined wage of all the apprentices surrounding this person did not equate to what they were gaining every year off the back of us and other workers. So not long after being sacked, I learned what worker co-ops were. You can imagine how boggled I was and just how bloody relieved my heart was when I discovered that co-ops aren't just the corner shop on the end of your street selling fair trade goods. At its heart, as we've already discussed, at its heart, a co-op is a group of people with a shared interest who are looking to improve the conditions of life and work for themselves, but they also want to improve their local and wider community, especially as we've heard with the student co-op housing. So, best of all, is the fact that we can decide, especially as a worker co-op, that only workers can be members and that only members can be shareholders. So, as it was mentioned earlier, there isn't the total democratic control. People can't buy any more shares. Every member of SUMA has a £1 share in the business, no more, no less. We each have one vote that reflects that. All we want to do is good and we want to benefit from it. There must be a catch, honestly. But there's not. I can't find a catch as of yet. There might be one. I just haven't found it. So every co-op, as we've heard, and as we'll soon learn, kind of varies in what they can offer members and its workers as individuals. But the 7 cooperative principles do ensure that the output is positive and that rewards are plenty. So I try to do a list of some of the benefits of working at SUMA. It kind of trails off towards the end because, yeah, it sounds like brag, but there's loads. So I'll just name a few. There's incredible flexible working hours and so many other elements of flexible working. There's multi-skilling. It's honestly what we've survived on for all these years is the fact that I might be a QC coordinator, but I'm able to suddenly do half a shift in the warehouse picking someone's order. I'm able to go across into our other facility and start checking in commodities. You name it, we multi-skill, and it's not just to fit the needs of the business, but it's to fit the needs of the worker. If they require change and they don't want to go find a job elsewhere, we can try and facilitate them somewhere else within the co-op. There's ample training opportunities that come with that, or even if you're not looking to rise, because some people don't want to rise because there's no pay rise with a promotion, but there is ample training opportunities to cover that. Everyone, as I said, has input into the business, and an overall purpose and direction of the co-op is controlled by us all. There is a ludicrous amount of holiday allowance. There is above living wage rates. We're currently on £16.24 an hour. That's all of us. No gender pay gap. There's cracking pension and health package. These are all monetary, of course. There's free canteen facilities. Honestly, the fact that every worker gets one free cooked hot meal every shift makes the world of difference. It really does. There's total business transparency. We all see the books. We all know what's going on. We might be turning over a lot of money, but we can all see where it is, what's going on, and we can all talk about it fairly. There is a focus on people's mental health and well-being. We have a very large trained mental well-being team. There's generous paid breaks. There's an on-site union branch because even cooperatives need to unionize. We do plenty of DEIB work because we realise that there's a lot of us. We are a segment of society. We're not perfect. We've always got to improve. So we invest in reviewing our diversity, our equality, our inclusion, and our belonging. And generally, honestly, I got to the end of this list. I was just like, I'm really bloody proud of this place. I could not say that about anywhere else I've ever worked. It's just how proud I am to be a member. So yeah, I can't be more honest when I say that everything we do is for the genuine impact of our actions and not for the good PR and for free marketing. I'm one of the organisers of our Pride Network. I'm a union shop steward. I volunteer on our food bank runs. I stand on the streets with, as you can see, I stand on the streets with my comrades when the co-op mobilises to fight against oppression in our local and national community. It isn't just putting a quid in a bucket for Dress Down Friday and sticking a post on LinkedIn about a worker who's been here for 20 years and we gave them a little novelty pen with our logo on it. It's so much more than that. So yeah, and finally, I just thought I'd add this on since I'm on the steering group of the YCN, the Young Co-operators Network. I fell into this when I started at Suma. It's one of the requirements during trial membership that we've got to interact with the wider co-op community. And I came across the YCN because they hold lunch and learn sessions, which again are to kind of familiarise young people with all the alternatives that cooperatives can offer. I'm now part of that, both on the steering group and generally as a young person within the cooperative sector. So we try to provide a network for young people to communicate with each other, to learn, and we try to put on events and other gatherings and online things so that people can learn more, introduce it to new people. And it just generally needs a bit more youth in it. It needs a bit more of a young person's spirit, because clearly there's not a lot of young people who know about co-ops. So yeah, that is me in a very brief nutshell. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bunsey. If I can just get you to stop sharing your screen.
Absolutely.
So I can take over. So yeah, as you can see, there are lots of different types of co-ops, all working in different sectors, all doing slightly different things, but all working towards, well, within the framework of the 7 cooperative principles and towards making their communities a better place, which is why they are such a joy to work for. If you are considering starting your own co-op, there is support available through Co-ops UK, and we're going to talk a little bit about that now. You can visit this web address here to find out more information. There is a step-by-step tool online about starting a new co-op, which takes you through the startup process. And this will be from testing your idea all the way through to formally registering as a co-op. And you'll be able to get expert advice, information, and guidance to help you decide if a cooperative structure is right for your business or for your idea, and how you can finance the setup of that cooperative business, create a business plan, choose the right cooperative structure, and get started, basically. When Sister Midnight was registering as a new co-op, we used this tool, and it was part of what helped us settle on using a cooperative model. Through the Hive, you can also get business support. So you can get up to 10 days of tailored and fully funded business support with professional and experienced consultants. And this can be across a range of different subjects. So you get one-to-one support. You can get peer mentoring from an experienced co-op, and you can get access to all kinds of training as well. So it can be really great if you just need that kind of one-to-one engagement with someone who really understands how to set up and develop an idea for a cooperative, and really take you through the process and help you make sure that you're getting it right from the very get-go. Peer mentoring can be such a useful tool. We had a lot of this when we were starting up Sister Midnight, learning from other co-ops about how they handled things like governance and fair pay for their staff and fundraising. So it's really great just being able to be connected with all these different types of businesses working across the cooperative movement to understand how everyone's doing it a little bit differently and working to meet the needs of their specific co-op. And obviously the training is totally invaluable as well. That can give you all sorts of information and skills that you need, from HR to financial management to how to be a society secretary. So really a diverse skill set there that you can access and learn as part of the Hive support. So we've got a bit of time now for some Q&A. So if anyone has got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or to just unmute yourself and talk. You can ask me directly about any of the stuff that we've covered in the presentation or about Sister Midnight, or if you've got questions about SUMA or the YCN or Edinburgh Student Housing Co-op, feel free to direct those to Bunsey and Amru. So Marie Fernandez asking what changes we made to create a positive work culture. So there were lots of changes to be made. We spent a really long time researching the kind of working culture that we want to implement at Sister Midnight, and how we implement that now as we're starting to move towards opening for trading. One of the really helpful things that we did a training session on with Stir to Action was sociocracy, so looking at sociocratic decision-making methods, which is basically where you have a framework for making decisions within your organization that helps to decentralize power and social hierarchy so that everyone can be really engaged and involved with decision-making processes. So that was one thing that we did that has really kind of changed the way that we discuss decisions and come to decisions on important issues as a group. And that's something that we're going to think about implementing once we have more staff and sort of widen out what we're doing with Sister Midnight. The other one was fair pay. As I mentioned, when I was running the venue by myself back in Deptford, I couldn't afford to pay myself more than £3 an hour. I don't do that anymore. Everyone who works for Sister Midnight receives London Living Wage as a minimum. At the moment, all our wages are funded by grants. So we really have to try and just see where one grant is coming from to the next. But once we're up and trading, making sure that all of our staff are paid fairly and are receiving at least London Living Wage is going to be a really important part of that working culture. And lastly, like EDI training on a regular basis is something that we have implemented and that we're going to be implementing more to make sure that we have a shared set of values and a shared understanding across the organization as to how we approach inclusivity and diversity, and make sure that everyone is kind of on the same page with the understanding of the expectations of how to navigate working with people who come from different experiences, different backgrounds, different cultures, and how to do that in a respectful way and set those boundaries so that everyone can come to work feeling comfortable and feeling respected and understood. So there's loads more that I could go into, but I won't here. But those are just a few of the key ones that I think are really important. There's a question from the Plunkett Foundation here about for everyone. So Bunsey and Amru, if you'd like to answer this one as well, feel free to jump in. What would your top tips be for existing co-ops who'd like to get more young people involved?
I can come back to that if you want. As an employer, I think it's the co-op's responsibility to provide lighting, is to provide job descriptions which are not unfair, which cater for people who are younger and might not meet the unrealistic job requirements these days. But it's also, as you'd expect, to not discriminate as an employer against people of age. And then as a cooperative, I think it's, speaking like as Suma, I think it's a cooperative responsibility to invest in the cooperative movement in a sense where things like this exist to help educate people to what co-ops are, because no matter how good you are at interviewing or putting out job descriptions, if there isn't a pool of young people who know what a co-op is, then you can't employ young people. So it's a co-op's responsibility to educate.
Great, thanks, Nancy. Amber, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I can just add that with our co-op, what we try to do is we try to bring the wider community into our event space basement that I was talking about earlier, because yeah, one of the issues that the cooperative movement is facing in general is visibility. Like I think Bunsey was saying earlier that before he started working in a co-op, to him all the co-op meant was just the corner shop. I went to high school just up the road from where Edinburgh Student Housing Co-op is, and I'd walked past it tens, if not hundreds of times without really any clue what it was. So I think, yeah, we have to be more visible, and we have to emphasize to people why co-ops are different and how they represent a benefit both to them personally and to the wider community.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with all of that. I interestingly learned a few months ago that the government website, which lists all of the available business structures, doesn't actually list co-ops as an option. So there is like a real lack of visibility, as you say, Amru, out there. And I think it's the responsibility of all co-ops really to be trying to engage their communities in their little corner of the world in a bit of an education process around understanding what co-ops are and what they do. And I think definitely we need to be engaging in this at a younger age. We need to be trying to get into schools and colleges and universities and getting people familiar before they kind of enter their careers and enter the workplace with cooperative models and how they work, so that people see that as an option that's out there rather than just not knowing that it exists. Got a question here from Young Manchester about why Sister Midnight chose the Community Benefits Society model. We looked at a lot of different options. We looked at being a CBS, a standard cooperative society, a charity, a CIC. Ultimately, I think what spoke to us about the Community Benefits Society model was the fact that it had a sort of legislative aspect which gave people ownership over the business, and obviously that voting mechanism where people would be able to make decisions about how we were operating as a co-op. And it was not for profit, which was really important to us in demonstrating to our community who we are and what we're about. Compared with like other models, I think being a CIC was another really strong contender, but that was firstly lacking in the sort of community ownership aspect. And secondly, there is still ways that you can distribute dividends to directors as a CIC, which is something that works for some businesses. But for us, we felt it was really important that all of the profit we generated was going towards improving the co-op for all of the members. So that was really important for us. And also the ability to issue community shares. I think that was really the deciding factor, was as a young and like new business that was trying to reestablish ourselves, having only traded for 2 years previously, we knew that we needed a way to fundraise the money to do that that was a little bit outside of the normal ways that you might approach it, because we definitely weren't going to get a £250,000 loan from our local bank. So that I think was really the deciding factor, was that we would be able to raise finance directly from the community. We've got a couple of questions here about, for everyone, what's the procedure to join your co-op? Bunsey and Amru, do you want to answer that?
Okay, I'll go first. So you apply to Edinburgh Student Housing Co-op on our website, which we host, and the procedure for that is, I did it quite a long time ago now. You answer like 250 to 500 word paragraphs on why you want to live in a co-op, and then the next one is what skills do you think you can bring to the co-op. And then further down on the application form, we ask prospective members to read our safer spaces policy. So that's a policy that we've put together to make sure that the co-op is a welcoming, inclusive and safe space for all of our members. Safer spaces policy, and what was the final one? I don't remember what the final one is. So yeah, it's a form you do online. You fill out two long questions and then a few shorter ones, and then once you've done that, we vote on them democratically. So all the applications get pulled onto this bit of software that we have, and all of our 106 members will read the applications and vote on them. It's very rare that we outright reject people. And then once that's been done, everyone's put onto the waiting list or allocated a free room if there is a room available at the time that people were applying. So yeah, it's a pretty straightforward process. Most people have a very positive and straightforward experience with it. I think the only thing I would say and come back to is the visibility issue. So I think we need to be doing a lot more there, because I think we're listed on the Students' Union website for available accommodation for students in Edinburgh, but we're not on the University of Edinburgh website, and I don't think we'll be on Heriot Water, Napier, or Queen Margaret either.
Bunsey, what about joining SUMA? How do you go about that?
It's a bit like going for a job anywhere, really. The place puts up a job vacancy and you go for it. The only difference is that sort of SUMA, to be a member, you've got to be a worker, but you don't have to be a member to be a worker. So we have some workers who are on fixed term contracts, so there might be a vacancy and you apply to get in as a short-term work of the co-op. And then there's some vacancies that are straight to trial membership. And then sometimes we recruit internally from the pool of fixed term workers into trial membership, which inevitably leads to membership. The system ain't perfect. Systems cause quite a few upsets, quite honestly. But the good thing is, as a co-op, we've acknowledged this, we see it's unfair, and we're working to address it. So generally, it's just like going for a job anywhere, really.
Nice. And with Sister Midnight, anyone can join, but they have to do so when we have an active share offer, and they join by investing in a share, and then they have that shareholding, and we use their money to make Sister Midnight a better co-op for everyone. And eventually, when we're generating profit, they're able to withdraw that money and terminate their membership if they want to. Our first share offer has closed. We may be opening it up again in the new year, but once we're up and running, we haven't decided yet whether we'll have an open share offer which will allow new members to join at any time, or whether we would periodically do share offer rounds for a limited amount of time to take on new members. So that's a decision that we're still making. But co-ops who do take on members through share offers do have both of those options. I've got another question here. Bunsey, as you said, there aren't many people, or especially young people, who know about co-ops. What do you do in that situation? Educate them before they join a co-op or after? I guess this question could be directed to anyone. So Bunsey, would you like to answer first? And then Anne-Marie, perhaps you might want to chip in.
It's very simple, and we talk about quite a lot, is because in an ideal world, everyone knows about co-ops, and you can hire a person who's so cooperatively minded and you can teach them to do anything. Which is the ideal world. But sadly, as we've established, there isn't a pool of a lot of cooperatively minded people. So sadly, our approach at the moment is to find people who are right for the job we're getting them for, and then to make them cooperative. Obviously, that's a lot more trial and error and doesn't always work, because sadly, there's people who don't like this structure. More for them. But yeah, in an ideal world, we'd already get cooperatively minded people, but we have to work to address that by hiring people first and then training them up on co-op values.
Can you explain what you mean by people who are cooperatively minded? Like, how would you sort of summarize that as a thing that you look for in a potential employee at SUMA?
You've got a lot of people who will bust a gut to get the job done. They'll do a fantastic job, and they'll do overtime. They'll do everything. They'll be the best at their job in the team, but they might not attend GMs. They might not understand why we're an equal pay, non-hierarchical structure. They might not care about any other co-ops. They might not believe in the 7 principles. And some people are quite embedded, especially older people, less young people, are quite embedded in a very corporate world, and it's hard to teach people that another option exists.
Yeah. So I guess what you're looking for is people whose personal values are somewhat aligned with the cooperative values. Because I think you can teach people after joining a co-op a lot of things about co-op working culture, but you can't change at the core of it if people believe in, as you say, fair pay or non-hierarchical structures, or all the kind of things that come with working at a co-op. So getting people into that kind of mindset, I think, or getting more people engaged with that mindset and with those values, is something that needs to happen before they join co-ops, before they're even looking to join co-ops, which is why I think there needs to just be so much more education around what co-ops are and what they do. So with Sister Midnight, one of our plans is to make partnerships with local schools and colleges and try and go in and talk to them about cooperative models and about what we're doing and what other co-ops are doing, so that you kind of get that awareness very early on. Because it just doesn't happen enough at the moment. Did either of you get taught about co-ops at schools? How old were you when you first found out what a co-op was, or first sort of became aware of it?
Maybe like 21, 22, something like that.
Yeah, we've got someone in the chat saying they were 25. Bunsey, what about you? How old were you when you first found out about co-ops?
I was a lucky one because I used to volunteer at one of Suma's customers' shops. So I'd probably learned about co-ops when I was more like 17 or 18. But I still didn't fully understand what it was until I lost my job, as I was saying earlier, and was desperately looking for something to reflect my values. And then I was like, hang on, I'll hear this out a bit. And was fascinated.
Yeah, so it was the same for me. I was in my early 20s before I really understood what a co-op was. So yeah, a lot of work to be done in educating young people, but there are so many great opportunities for young people that can be provided by joining and starting and working for co-ops. So hopefully we'll see a lot of more of that in the future. We are a little over time now, so if anyone has got any other questions, please pop them in the chat and I'll try my best to type out some answers there. But otherwise, thank you so much to everyone for joining. Thank you to Amory and Bunsey for sharing their experiences. It's been really great.